Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Professor Dr. Nur Hayati Abu Qasim, Director of National Cheng University Overseas Hub in Malaysia, Dean of Faculty of Dentistry, University Kebangsaan Malaysia, Professor Ricky Wenkuei Chuang, Associate Vice President for International Affairs and Director of International Relations Divisions, National Cheng University, Taiwan, Associate Professor Dr. Abdul Latiff Ahmad, Director of International Relations Center, UKM Global University Kebangsaan Malaysia, Professor David Huerta Harris, National Director for Short-Term Mobility, Tecnológico de Monterrey, Mexico, Mr. Darren McDermott, Team Leader, EU Support to Higher Education in the ASEAN Region Share, and Dr. Tanot Unjah, Deputy Director of International Relations Center, UKM Global University Kebangsaan Malaysia. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Selamat datang and welcome all to the webinar co-hosted by National Cheng University Overseas Hub in Malaysia in collaboration with International Relations Center with the theme International Strategies on Student Mobility in the Era of Global Pandemic. My name is Hafiz Rasul Muhammad. I'm your MC for today. Ladies and gentlemen, we are indeed very fortunate today to be able to gather these great figures from around the globe to discuss about the current challenges faced and the strategic alternatives that higher learning institutions and organizations have laid down or planning to carry out in the years to better position ourselves in the current norm. As of today, ladies and gentlemen, at 8 a.m. this morning, we have 330 recorded registered participants for this webinar. All right, our honorable guests, without further ado, now I would like to welcome Professor Dr. Nur Hayati Abu Qasim, the Director of NCKU Overseas Hub in Malaysia, and Dean of Faculty of Dentistry, University Kebangsaan Malaysia, to deliver her welcoming speech.
Thank you, Mr. Hafiz. Mr. Darren McDermott, Team Leader Designate EU Support to Higher Education in the ASEAN region, or also known as SHARE. Professor David Huerta Harris, National Director for Short-Term Mobility at Tecnológico de Monterrey, Mexico. Professor Ricky Wenkuei Chuang, Associate Vice President for International Affairs and Director of International Relations Divisions at National Cheng University. Associate Professor Dr. Abdul Latiff Ahmad, the Director of International Relations Centers, also known as UKM Global University Kebangsaan Malaysia. Dr. Tanot Unjah, Deputy Director of UKM Global, who will be our moderator today, university representatives and participants across the globe. Ladies and gentlemen, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and very good morning and good evening to all our panelists, attendees from different parts of the globe. It gives me a great pleasure to welcome everyone to this webinar entitled International Strategies in Student Mobility in the Era of Global Pandemic. This webinar is a collaborative effort between National Cheng University Overseas Hub in Malaysia and the International Relations Center at UKM. We have invited distinguished panelists from 4 different countries to discuss the challenges of student mobility in the era of global pandemic. And as we all know, we are already in the 3rd wave, and hopefully things will settle very, very soon. But we just have to do all to change our way of living in this pandemic. At the same time, this webinar is also to share the panelists' insights on the international strategies and approaches for successful mobility program, which as we are now in our new norms and it has to be done virtually, as well as addressing the challenges in the short term and beyond. Ladies and gentlemen, last year, the Office of International Office of NCKU was empowered to leverage on different resources and explore the best possibility towards a multilateral academia, industry, government, alumni exchange, and a multifaceted network bridging academic research to the community and industrial, including experiential learning of university students. As a result, the NCKU Overseas Hub in Malaysia was launched on the 13th of August 2020 as a proof of deep commitment and unflinching support of NCKU to accelerate cross-border collaborative projects, including teaching and learning. And for your information, 2 other hubs was also being established in Thailand and Vietnam. The NCKU Overseas Hub in Malaysia aspire to encourage and promote NCKU and Malaysian academician, and I think now we can include the regional academician and industrial player to join forces in closing the gaps between research, innovation, and entrepreneurship. For opportunities, please visit our Facebook at NCKUOH in Malaysia. As we all know, NCKU is situated in Taiwan, ancient and capital city, former capital city, and now the cultural capital, Tainan City, with more than 1,900 faculty members, 21,000 students, and 140,000 alumni worldwide. NCKU is best known for their comprehensiveness of the field of study, including science, engineering, medicine, management, planning, and design. Through their initiative, they also have joint research program between Malaysia, Thailand, Vietnam, and the Satu joint research that was established. While I am currently the Dean at the Faculty of Dentistry at UKM, it has been a pleasure serving as the Director at NCKU Hub in Malaysia. UKM has a diverse community and a global network of academic scholars working in partnership with universities, government, and communities worldwide. Our local and global connections provide the platform for our researchers to conduct groundbreaking, influential research network that impact the general public. As one of the established research universities in Malaysia, UKM is committed to carry out changing research work and contribute leading-edge innovation, which will improve the lives of the community globally. And with over 2,000 academics, UKM is opening its door to partners to collaborate in our core areas, such as molecular biology, tissue engineering, stem cell, chemical and processes engineering, environmental and climate, and including cyber system and education 4.0. Dear esteemed panelists and attendees, I hope from today's discussion, our panelists will be able to share their knowledge on the university strategies for successful virtual mobility program and to explore ways in addressing student mobility challenges in this era. The pandemic, I am sure everybody knows, has forced us to critically reflect on internationalization efforts and opportunities presented to higher education institutions. Let us learn from each other, share information, as alone we can only do so little, and working together on how best to continue students' mobility and provide an effective learning experience for them. I look forward to a positive, and I hope everyone will have a fruitful outcome from this event. Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam. Thank you so much, Professor Dr. Nur Hayati Abu Qasim, for the warm, welcoming, and inspirational speech. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it is about time for me to introduce our moderator for this morning webinar. It is no other than our very own Dr. Tanot Unjah. Yes, she is currently the Deputy Director of International Relations Center, and prior to this position, she has been an active lecturer and field facilitator for one of the university mobility programs in the past 10 years. She also research fellow at Institute for Environment, and Development, preceding her PhD from the same Institute for Conservation Geology. Her area of research includes nature conservation, geoheritage, development and management, geotourism and geopark, sustainable utilization of non-renewable resources, and geohazard. As the head of the Geology and Landscape Heritage Program at Langkawi Research Center, one of the university's living lab, her research work is partnered with local authorities and have been translated and endorsed by Langkawi UNESCO Global Geopark, as well geopark development in the country. Well, now, here is our own Dr. Tanot Unjah.
Thank you, Mr. Hafiz, for such kind introductions. Good morning and good evening, everyone. It is an honor to moderate these sessions entitled International Strategies on Student Mobilities in the Era of a Global Pandemic, because it's the first webinar co-hosted by National Cheng University Overseas Hub in Malaysia and International Relations Center, UKM. It's been a year, or to be specific, 14 months since the pandemic of COVID-19 came to Earth for a visit, I guess, and Earth hasn't shown a sign of living. As part of adaptations and resilience to these visitors, universities across the globe have been emerged in virtual learning and make significant improvement as well as innovations in the area of teaching and learning. However, one area of teaching and learning that has taken a back during these 14 months is student mobility. Has been postponed as it best experienced physically and to some extent partially shared as a virtual program. Previously, it has been a top list in university strategic plan and approach as it create a cherry on top of cream effect to one undergraduates or graduate experience, as well as creating quality graduate students and to some extent greater graduate employabilities. In general, student mobility program defined as an opportunity for students to study or work abroad while undertaking the degree program, whether undergraduates or postgraduate, can be both incoming and outcoming in the form of bilateral or one-way study abroad, and often a fee-paying program for either 1 week, 1 semester, or 1 academic year. So as a content developer, coordinator, or facilitator for this mobility program, we have choice of postponing our mobility program or translating part of it as a virtual mobility or create new virtual programs. So the series of questions arise. Is the present approach of virtual mobility be able to create the same effect as physical mobility? What is the feasible future of student mobility in this era? And what are strategies for student mobility in these global pandemics? Or what is the picture of student mobility after the post-vaccine era? So today, to discuss this matter deeper, I'm joined by 4 distinguished panelists who have been gathered an amount of experience and knowledge of mobility in the belt across the globe before and during the pandemic. So the first panelist is Professor Wenkuei Chuang. Professor Ricky is a professor at Institute of Microelectronics in Department of Electrical Engineering, National Cheng University, Taiwan. He is also the Associate Vice President for the Office of International Affairs and Director of International Relations Divisions. Before joining NCKU, Professor Ricky has gained substantial experience working as a postdoctoral researcher at the NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory, California Institute of Technology, USA. Professor Ricky has earned his PhD at the University of California in 2001. He is also a graduate of Johns Hopkins University Electrical and Computer Engineering program. So his research interests include active components in electro-optic modulars, switch based on lithium niobate and silicons, and passive components of gratings, splinters, and attenuators, waveguide, and the silicons and compound semiconductor device. Welcome, Prof. Ricky. Pleasure to have you this morning with us. The second panelist is Associate Professor Dr. Abdul Latiff Ahmad. Associate Professor Dr. Abdul Latiff Ahmad currently holds the positions as a Director of UKM Global, the International Relations Center of UKM or University Kebangsaan Malaysia. He is also a senior lecturer in the Center of Research in Media and Communications, the Faculty of Social Sciences and Humanities. He obtained his bachelor degree in politics and international relations from the University of Cairns, United Kingdom, and his master's degree from University Tecnológico Mara or UITM Shah Alam, Malaysia. In 2013, he obtained his PhD in communication studies from University of Queensland, Australia. He's currently the Malaysia Regional Vice President for the World Communication Associations and also a committee member for the National Strategic Communication Committee under the Higher Education Department of Ministry of Education. Dr. Abdul Latiff's research interests include intercultural communication and internalizations, and he has become a speaker on matters of internalizations and intercultural communication in various events, such as the International Workshop for International Office, Share Student Mobility, and Alumni Workshop, APAI, and University Administrator Workshop. Thank you for joining us this morning, Dr. Abdul Latiff. Our third panelist is Professor David Huerta Harris. He's the National Director for Short-Term Mobility of Tecnológico de Monterrey, Mexico. Professor David Huerta holds a BA in Industrial and System Engineering and an MA with a concentrations in a strategic planning both by Tec de Monterrey and is currently a PhD candidate for the University of Hull in UK. Prior to taking up the positions of National Short-Term Mobility Director in September 2015 at the Tecnológico de Monterrey, Professor David served for 5 years as a director of Tec de Monterrey International Liaison Office at the Yale University, where he initiated several collaborations initiatives between his institutions and Yale, as well as another prestigious university in the Northeast like Columbia and Brown. He is currently in charge of developing and implementing a set of innovative programs for international students under the Tech 21 model in collaborations with the National School of Tecnológico de Monterrey. Welcome, Professor David Harris. And the fourth panelist is Mr. Darren McDermott. Mr. Darren is currently the team leader of the European Union support of higher education in the Asian region, or SHARE program. SHARE is the EU's flagship higher education program with ASEAN to strengthen regional cooperations, enhance quality, regional competitiveness, and internalizations of Asian higher education, contributing to the development of Asian's higher education space. Mr. Darren has worked on numerous EU commissions and British Council funded education development and capacity building program with associations of Southeast Asian Asian member states, ministries of education and their higher education institutions. Following education role in Japan and Ireland and Masters of Science in Education and Training Management, Darren joined the School of Education Studies at Dublin City University as a lecturer and researcher on international education programs. He subsequently conducted research on the internalizations of educations on the Japan Government Research Scholarship at Waseda University, Tokyo. Thank you for joining us this morning, Mr. Darren. So, as the introductions, our panelist is representing institutions or organizations from these regions in America Latin that support mobility. So shall we begin? With regard to the institution you represent and role you play in the mobility, so we would like to hear a sharing on your institutions and the role you play in mobility. Shall we begin with Prof. Wenkuei from National University Cheng Kung? From National Cheng Kung University, Prof. Wenkuei.
Okay. First of all, very happy to join this discussion. Well, the study abroad has always been a popular activity among our students, and like what I mentioned before the start of this webinar, before the strike of a pandemic, every year we have several hundred of students applying for studying abroad. And the most favorite country destination undoubtedly would be the European country and also Japan, and then China maybe, and also Korea. So these are the popular destination for our students to visit. And so that our students usually visit the host university for like at least a semester, or the longest will be the whole year. And so that and usually students visit the host university probably around the junior year, the third year of the college. and so that they usually go there and take courses, and when they complete it, they will bring the credit back, and so that can count toward their graduation. So that's been going on for many years until the until the strike of COVID-19 last year. So everything has come to a halt. So many of our host university have sent notice to our university. You know, they would prefer to to temporarily put a halt on the student exchange, and instead they asked us to our student to participate as a virtual exchange student. And so we have given this option to our student, and like what I mentioned in the beginning, that this kind of option is not very welcome to our student. So most of our students choose to defer the exchange for another year. Yeah, and so that has been, and now after a year, we still don't know when this pandemic is going to end. So it looks like we're going to tell the student again that, you know, probably have to defer another year. So, but anyway, we will keep our finger crossed. Hopefully that by the time next year, well, I mean, the life will go back to normal. So that's how.
So
yeah.
Prof. you are, because of that situation, you are coordinating the program for your students' mobility of that choice, right? Particularly for the final year. And do you offer any program of virtual mobilities at your institutions?
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. We do accept student. I mean, if they choose to be a virtual exchange student to our university, yes, we, for example, the College of Management have accept few students as a virtual. And then we have one or two, yes.
Probably we're going to share more later about the program, because we would like to know your institutions and how you play your role in the mobility of students. So shall we go to Prof. David? Would you like to share what is your institutions and your role and you play in the student mobility? Prof. David, please unmute yourself.
Apologies. I just wanted also to thank you for the opportunity to share the space and exchange ideas to the organizers of the webinar. I'm representing Tec de Monterrey. Tec de Monterrey is a relatively young university. It was funded in 1943, so we are 77 years old. And it's a non-for-profit private university that has non-government operational support. It has been, it started actually by an effort that resulted from an internationalization experience. Our founder, Eugenio Garza Sada, had been studying in the US and came back to Mexico with this project in mind to have a university that could help Mexicans to be equipped as professionals to succeed. And so I wanted to point that out because it's associated to the topic that we are today discussing. A huge project as a university can come up as an outcome from an internationalization experience. And in this case, our founder was that person. And so Tec de Monterrey started in Monterrey, Mexico, an industrial city in the north. Then it grew throughout Mexico. We currently have 26 campuses spread out around the Mexican Republic and some offices abroad, 18 of them. So it also has in its core this entrepreneurial DNA because entrepreneurship is one of our, let's say, core goals as an institution, not just to teach it, but also be able to be an agent of change in Mexico and globally as well. And just a few bullet notes. We were one of the first universities that was able to get an external certification from the Southern Association of Colleges and Schools. We were the first university who had an internet connection in Mexico and Latin America. As I already mentioned, entrepreneurship is at the core of our university. When our students graduate, we have kept track of them, and at least 41% of them start a business after graduation. But most importantly, one of the things that distinguishes Tec de Monterrey is that we have the goal of 6 out of 10 of our undergraduates have a form of international experience. So you can imagine how hard it has been for our university to have to cope with the challenges of this pandemic, because it is very much embedded in what we have devised our students have to accomplish throughout the university years. So this is a huge point for us.
Yeah, thank you, David. Having 6 international collaborations among all your connections for your students is quite a lot. So yeah, but we would like to hear that later, because to hear how you link that student or keep your 6 international connections for your students. Let's move to Darren, shall we? Would you like to share about your institution that you represent and role you play? You're definitely different from the others, but don't worry, Dr. Latiff, I'll come to you later. Yeah, Darren Williams.
Thank you very much, and thank you also for the invitation to join today's webinar. It's a very interesting topic, and again, it's very much in the foremost of our minds, as we seem to be entering back into something approaching where we were this time last year. I'm joining you from Singapore, and just in the last couple of days and weeks, things have taken a turn for the worst again. But it doesn't dim the optimism and I suppose the approach of sharing our knowledge and experience and learning from each other on how we overcome these challenges. So I'm the team leader of the Support to Higher Education in the ASEAN region program. It is the largest higher education cooperation program underway with the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, and particularly the ASEAN Secretariat in Jakarta. It's solely funded by the European Commission, and I suppose this is fitting given that it's in the context of a 44-year-old dialogue partnership between the EU and ASEAN, and that's recently been elevated to a strategic partnership. So SHARE has been running since 2015. Its overarching objective is to strengthen regional cooperation and enhance the quality, competitiveness, and internationalization of ASEAN higher education institutions. When we say ASEAN, we mean the 10 member states of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. The program has just been extended until 2022, the end of 2022. And we have a 3 result area focus. So they're as follows: policy dialogues with regional stakeholders, ASEAN qualifications frameworks and quality assurance, and then credit-bearing and transferable intra-ASEAN student mobility scholarships. And we work with a network of 32 ASEAN partner universities, of which I'm pleased to say University of Bangsa, Malaysia is one. And we're just starting up again on our extension and really looking forward to having many more detailed engagements and conversations with our partner university network and the wider higher education community in ASEAN. Thank you.
Yep, thank you, Darren. That's enlightening us on, there's your policies, your results on policy studies and quality framework. I'll come back to that later. Now, Dr. Latiff, would you like to share your institutions and your role in student mobility?
Thank you very much, Dr. Tanot, and thank you as well to Prof. Ricky, Mr. Darren, also Prof. David for coming over and sharing your insights. Definitely a great honor to be listening to your experiences as well. Representing University Kebangsaan Malaysia, we are the National University of Malaysia. Currently, we are ranked at number 141 in the QS ranking. We have just turned 51 years old, so we are a lot younger there, David, yeah? And we've just turned 51, which makes it, this is the first year that we do not qualify for the top universities 50 under 50 category anymore. So we're now in the big boys club as it is. We have 13 faculties and 12 research institutes that marks us as a very comprehensive research university in Malaysia. There's a role that we play, which is to uphold the sovereignty of the national language. So if your students ever have the opportunity to come to Malaysia, it is part of our university's aspiration to also share the beauty of our language to our students, to international students as well. Well, we've been very, very active with student mobility, and we're among the earlier universities, pioneer universities that promote summer program as well. This would have marked the 14th year that we've initiated our first summer program. But aside from that, we've been practicing various exchange programs with students ranging from Germany, Australia, Mexico, Hong Kong, many European countries, and definitely the support from our ASEAN components, our ASEAN counterparts as well. Now, one thing exciting about University Kebangsaan Malaysia is that whenever we offer mobility programs, we also have the offering of our living labs, which is this some interesting tourist sites / research laboratories to all of our students. So we've got places in Langkawi, Chinee Island, Chinee Lake, Fraser's Hill, Mersing, where you get to see the beautiful coral reefs and the mangroves. So we, our packages and our programs for inbound mobility also would include students being able to explore the other sides of Malaysia. Yes, we were also badly hit with the pandemic. I believe that 2020 was a year of continuity and survival, but now 2021 is more about creativity and, you know, and coming up, like we have to face it as this is the way to go. I remember last year when we were planning for this year, and look where we are this year, and we've got to start being a bit more creative. We've got to start thinking about working together as regions, as you know, as communities, as global citizens, and as what we have done with Tecnológico de Monterrey has done with UKM as well. So I think this is the year where everyone needs to start to think and plan, like this could be where the future is going to be like. So last year has always been chaotic with everyone trying to ensure learning could take place, continuity could take place. But now I feel that we're in a different ball game. We've got to be focused on what to expect in the near future. Thank you, Dr. Tanot.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Latiff. That's very much what we are doing today, because we are moving from surviving or into creativity and innovations. So that's the reason we have it. We have this webinar today. So we would like to see, how do we move forward? Yeah. So let's bring us to the second questions. I know Prof. Ricky already answered some of it. Based on your experience in managing mobility at your respective institutions, what is current mobility trend and how it affected your institutions and organizations? Shall we start with Prof. David on your the trend in Latin America and how the mobility trend in your Latin America or in university and how it affects your institutions?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Tanot. It affected us big time. We first had to deal with the issue of returning students who were abroad when the pandemic was declared official. And although we had a few students, well, several students that were outside of Mexico, and we also had international students. So the first months, as you have mentioned, were more reactive in terms of solving urgent problems of our students abroad and our students in Mexico. But then we moved towards turning to alternatives, and I guess we will speak about those later. But in general, we have a mobility that is quite large in terms of the numbers of students that go abroad. 7,500 students would usually go abroad throughout the year. about 70% would go to European countries, 23% to North America, South America 6%, and the rest to Asia and Oceania. So you can imagine the challenges that we had when students were trapped outside of their homes, and they were also with us in our campuses and trying to go back to their home countries. So perhaps that would be the first, let's say, milestone that I would like to point out. This capacity that we need to have to adjust and react to this first big issue, and then of course being for some months in a planning mode to try to figure out what was next. I would like just to point out one more thing. When we here in Mexico were told by the government to quarantine, the Tec de Monterrey, my institution, stopped for 1 week activities. And the leaders of the institution came up with a few guiding principles. The first one was to take care of the community, first priority. And the second one was to ensure academic continuity. So those were our two goals: take care of ourselves and our colleagues, friends, country, students, and then ensure that things would continue in the academic field. So that was something that helped us because it created this momentum and this, let's say, awareness of professors of what was the most important thing to do at that point of time. And I guess I'll stop here and maybe come back to some point later.
Thank you. You already highlight two important things. First is capacity and adjustments, and secondly is to have a guiding principles, looking at what is priority versus your academic continuations and their safety, and so that they keep momentums. So fantastic that Dr. David, Mr. David, shall we move to Dr. Latiff? Would you like to share on Asia? Before I ask Darren's on Europe, if it's possible, the trend. Okay, Dr. Latiff, with you.
Hi, I think Prof. Ricky has mentioned quite a bit of what's happening in certain countries.
But if you have more to add to what happened in the Asia region.
Yeah, well, I think it's quite an exciting time last year. So everyone was trying to jump into the virtual mobility battlefield, you know. So everyone was trying to do virtual mobility, and everyone was trying to find understanding concepts, understanding frameworks, understanding how will this take place, time zones different, how do we incorporate all this? Well, I feel that at the national level for Malaysia, the Ministry of Higher Education and the Education Malaysia and the policy team has actually started to come up with a framework on what defines virtual mobility. What we wanted to ensure headcount was still there. We wanted to ensure that what we're doing is also contributing to the internationalization data of the universities. So the ministry, as of this year, has actually come up and requesting for a lot of international office to give their input on what should be virtual mobility, what is edutourism, for example, and what is physical and virtual mobility or summer program entirely under the new pandemic, under the current pandemic. So this has been an initiative, and it's something for us to look at, for us to have a clearer direction on what is to take place. I must agree that there has been a lot of there's a downfall in numbers of major universities as everyone put a halt due to the travel restrictions. However, it's quite interesting to see what's happening within the region. Certain universities, such as Brunei universities, have the discovery year, where they would have to go out for a year and do, you know, and participate in mobility or volunteer work. And some universities in Asia still has to do that. So everyone's trying to come up with different ideas. It's also interesting that during this time, Indonesia has come up with some exciting programs called the Campus Merdeka program, which is on the international Student Mobility Award, if I'm not mistaken, if that's being called. And well, there's Share as well. Share has also launched its program towards mobility. So it shows that with this foundation of organizations and funding that's coming in place, it's also exciting to see that mobility could still continue on. It just depends on what form it would be and whether any physical mobility would take place after. But aside from within the ASEAN region, we are also still getting participants, and also negotiations are still taking place. For example, Australia offers New Colombo plan for inbound to the Asia, for example, to Malaysia. And we are still having negotiations and communications as to how to transfer the physical component into the virtual component. And just as I was talking earlier on to Darren about the Turing scheme launched by the UK recently, which is also talking about bringing their students to Malaysia as early as September this year, though things may change or may differ according to how the situation persists. But people are, let's say the international team of the universities are still communicating, are still hopeful and thinking on doing various activities. But one thing I notice is that we've got to start still engage with one another. I think with Zoom, with webinars, this has helped us a lot. And I've noticed that, for example, I've met David more than 5-6 times this year, hasn't it been, David? And last year it would just been once. That would be it during one one seminar, for example. But we've come up with different ideas, and maybe we'll share it as we move along.
Yeah, later, just Latiff, because but the key words I figured from you is that we come out with not different approach, but we look for more because we have to fulfill the KPIs that we have, and then we must keep engaged, so that we continuously doing it, just like what Mr. David said, that academic continuations, but then still engage with our partners, still engage with our students. So Darren, what do you take on this? Would you like to share on the trend in Europe, I guess, because Dr. Latiff already shared some in Egypt, but if you want to add more to that, you're most welcome. And how it affects your institutions and organizations.
Yeah, thanks very much. I mean, I think there are a lot of similarities between Europe and ASEAN and the experience of a regional network or a regional unity like that. And just to, Dr. Latiff's point, there's an awful lot of activity, there's of initiatives, and a lot of willingness for universities and countries and national systems to engage across regions. So the trend in student mobility in ASEAN as well as Europe is very much towards regional integration and harmonization. In Europe, that's been going on somewhat longer than perhaps in ASEAN, but both regions are learning from each other, and particularly at a time like this, when all bets are off in some ways, and we have to really rethink how we approach internationalization. I would say that prior to COVID-19, digital transformation was a thing, it was happening, but it's almost a cliche now to say that COVID-19 accelerated this process. And if we look at, let's say, the European digital transformation of international education, this had been happening in the areas of credit transfer systems and also in delivery for modalities, digital modalities of international education. Because largely that mirrors where we are in the world today. A lot of our working lives are working with dispersed teams, working with people in other countries, and by virtue of the need to be in regular contact, we have to look for a digital solution. So, in every sense, the move to a paperless approach to education, paperless Erasmus in Europe, and the Europass scheme for recognizing credentials is happening elsewhere in the world. And that is a focus of the SHARE program as well, over the extension, to look at digital credentials as a way of giving students control of the credentials they earn on student mobility programs, and also not replacing physical mobility, but augmenting physical mobility by digital components to it.
Thank you, Darren. That's a lot there. But one thing that we realized that there's a regional integrations between the regions, that the learning continuously, and then there's the students. There's a lot that we can discuss later. So, Prof. Ricky, I have to get back to you because there's a question here from one Mariam, one Ahmad, saying that she would like to find out specifically the current mobility situations for NCKU, if she would like, because I know there's a lot more question here, but I think this is related to the question that we're in. Would you like to answer that?
Okay. Right now, all the incoming students are put on hold, except that if they receive some type of scholarship from our school or government, then they have the exception to come to our country. But before getting into our university, they are subjecting to 3-week quarantine procedure. So they have to find a hotel and stay there for 3 weeks, and then to make sure, and then be screened to make sure that they are free of a virus. And after that, they're allowed to join the university activity. So this is the current situation.
So there's a subject to offer letter and subject to quarantine as well.
Right, that's right.
So it's still possible to travel to Taiwan, but you have to go through those procedures first.
Yeah, that's very unfortunate. Yes, I know.
I think that's a process that we have to go through as well in the country, in Malaysia as well. So to minimize the risk.
Yes.
So we are moving to the next, because we already share a lot about this virtual mobility, the opportunity. We have to go there, but let's see, what is your institution's or organization take on virtual mobility? Yeah, I would like to start with share because you put on hold for a year, right, Darren? And then now you just come about with a scholarship for virtual mobility. How does your organization take on this virtual mobility, and how does your scholarship, do you offer scholarship for virtual mobility, or how is it? So Darren, shall we start with you?
Thanks very much. Yes, we had a natural break maybe in the program between phase 1 and phase 2. So we just resumed again at the end of February after finishing up following our last policy dialogue at the end of last year. I think a lot has happened since then, and naturally as a program, we needed to gear up and get back in the running, back into conversations with our partners, our university partners, and other stakeholders. So I would say we're still in the process of reaching consensus on what is going to be the most agreeable form of mobility for the SHARE program in the ecosystem of the 32 partner institutions and the various other result areas. But I think there's a lot of potential to explore this. The idea would be that it remains credit bearing. Any virtual mobility or virtual exchange or collaborative online international learning experience that students have, that they do secure credits for that. In terms of the financing of it and what it costs, well, naturally, we'll be putting a lot of funding into the development of a platform. And the idea that platform is not a Zoom or a Teams call, but is offers a lot more and is, as we say, very much an ecosystem approach to developing a virtual mobility platform. And the hope is that this isn't used solely for the period we're in now, where physical mobility is not a possibility, but it is integrated as part of the physical mobility experience once we can travel again and the restrictions So I would say I realize I'm not being overly specific on details of this platform just yet, but I would say watch this space. We look forward to sharing it with you in due course.
Yep, thank you, Darren. There's despite not very specific on it, but you give us a hope that you move forward to virtual collaborative learning as long as it credit bearings and there's a potential partner, and then you also develop a platform, be much secure than what we have now, or slightly different. We look forward to that, which is more like ecosystem approach. So on the same questions, I would like to ask Dr. Latiff, what is your institution's or organization take on virtual mobility here? You have shared some, and then I would like to hear more about it. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Tanot. University Kebangsaan Malaysia, we believe in offering virtual mobility programs and also allowing our students to take on opportunities to study abroad from their home, getting the experience of learning from foreign universities. And we do look forward to that. Ideally, we would be quite excited if a student can take a semester in one course in NCKU, one course in Tecnológico Monterrey, one course in NUS, one course in Toyo or Scuba. And they have like their schedule will be based on different countries as well. That would be an exciting thing to look at. I'm not sure it could be a logistical nightmare, but someone needs to sit down and work on the scheduling, and that's something that we would love to see. Well, for us, virtual mobility, of course, it is difficult to persuade students to participate for a semester program of virtual mobility. A 14-week commitment can be challenging, especially when it involves time difference, and also a student's interest. I think a lot of and some of the questions that I see in the Q&A as well is regards to the cultural experience being a key component of virtual mobility. But focusing on virtual mobility first, as I've mentioned, Malaysia and UKM being part of the ministry as well, is looking at how to define virtual mobility and to explore in terms of what makes it virtual mobility to a certain extent. But for us here, I teach a course on intercultural communication. As an educator, I think this is the most exciting time because my students have gotten to meet people from across the world that they would have not met in a normal physical classroom. So my advice is defining virtual mobility, incorporating some intercultural experiences or international experiences within the classroom is a good start. We don't have to jumpstart and make 14 weeks of co-teaching or a student having to take a course entirely in a different country. We take it step by step, and we can
more like teaser to this mobility, right?
Exactly. Yeah, and once they see so many commonalities, they see so many similarities, and they're excited to be part of the program. I think Tecnológico Monterrey's Global Week is a very exciting program that UKM has been honored to be a part of, where we could bring our Malaysian students and the Mexican students working on a 13-hour time difference, and and explaining to the students this is how global citizens are going to be like in the future. But for us, virtual mobility, we've worked with our associations. We've worked under the UMAP platform, the University of Malaysia, University Mobility of Asia Pacific. UKM has worked with Toyo University under Prof. Shingo Ashizawa and also De La Salle University. And we come up with a program where the students meet for 2 hours, they have to discuss with the project for a few hours, and then they come and present as a team from different nationalities. We've had different ways. We've had joint lectures from different countries under Sophia University with Xavier University and Mahidol University, where the lecturers give a lecture that involves students from these different parts of the world. Erlangga University with Malaysia, with UKM, has decided to share our intercultural course for a week, where they had one lecture and we had one lecture. Aside from that, we've had weekly meetings meetings with Muhammadiyah Jakarta, Vincent Paul Poland, and we also participate in our university friends. I know all my students speak highly about Sukuchat. I saw Mayu name in here, and I thought I'd give a shout out to that. Or being part of the University of Immaculate Conception's activities of bringing students in the spirit of sportsmanship and working together, that kind of harmonization. There's also the AIMS program and the VAF program that you've done. So basically, we're in an uncertain time. And instead of trying to categorize this and that as what it should be, we should try out things first and see what's working for us, what's not. We give this input to our partner universities. Talk to our partner universities. We're not struggling alone, they're struggling as well. And I think one university out there is just so happy that you're willing to approach them. Hey, let's do something for our students, just to create that. I believe in making the first steps. Virtual mobility as a whole will come as a more structured focus eventually. But we need to keep the spirits of internationalization still there and the exposure for our students to receive.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Latiff. That is enthusiastic, positive vibe that we need in this time and sessions, because you need to see what we can do. And I believe there are several questions out there asking about specific student mobility. I believe you already answered that. And then on the activities that university engaged during pandemic. And David, Dr. Latiff already mentioned that we work together. Is there anything you would like to add to that, you done or slightly different from what we did, or that can, I think, enlarge our ideas about how we can engage or create activities to our students? Yeah.
Yes, thank you. And I totally agree with what has been shared by Dr. Latiff, because we did something similar. We looked first to our partners, the resources that we had in networking and also throughout the years of building relationships. And we actually also relied initially on this regional consortiums, because as has been mentioned, there are those conversations taking place in some of those spaces. So it was easy for us, in a sense, to agree and have the same motivation to work together. And contrary to starting to take a route in transforming what we had as a physical mobility to virtual, we took a different approach initially. That was what, as you mentioned, to create new experiences for our students and international students that were not necessarily that structured, or that had to run throughout a whole course, throughout a whole semester, but actually moving towards smaller pieces of collaboration. So there was one initiative that had already been taking place at the Tec de Monterrey, which was called Global Classroom. And this simple idea was linking two courses together and collaborating through 5 to 6 weeks in let's say in similar topics or activities. So that had been taking place 2 years before the pandemic. So we built a lot of our new initiatives on that model that had already been started. And then we complemented it with this idea of having even shorter periods of collaboration, but let's say well structured in let's say like methodologies like COIL, collaborative online learning, that would give us the basis to make sure that the students were having, to some extent, the opportunity to first create some sort of trust, openness to discuss, then collaborate, and finally to reflect on the experience. So regardless of it was just 1 week or 3 or more weeks, we had the chance to at least through this design try to secure that there were some components that would lead towards some of the learning outcomes we were trying to have in our students.
Okay, thank you, David. You also mentioned the same thing, partnership, and we have all the partners work with our partners. But I also like the words that you're saying about you do the global classroom already exists program, but you strengthen it and enhance it. Yeah, throughout this pandemic. So you make it a new program. But I like another idea that you create new experience. So I will ask more about that later, and because you would like to see you know, a light at the end of the tunnel of this pandemic. Yeah. So I come to you, Prof. Ricky. Do you have anything you would like to share on your institutions of the Taken mobility, and how do you manage your mobility there? Yeah, or what kind of program that you engage with your students?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that I want to answer a quick question I believe was raised earlier by Professor Huerta in the chat.
Yeah.
Yeah, she was asking how can Taiwanese students be motivated to participate in a mobility program in Malaysia and the ASEAN country? Well, like what I say in the beginning, I think it is very difficult to change the mindset of the student. As a matter of fact, every semester we hold a information seminar to those students who are interested in pursuing study abroad. And we've been telling all these students, if you cannot garner your first or second choice, you might want to start thinking about the least favorable choice. And maybe you will find something unexpected. Some unexpected opportunity might surface and it might affect the course of your life. But enough have been saying, I can tell you the student is very hard to change. But my suggestion is that the way to convince the Taiwanese student to participate in mobility program in ASEAN countries, the only way is probably by mandate. What do I mean by mandate? If you're a student of a professor who happen to involve in a joint research with professor in ASEAN university, and if your advisor tell you to visit because that counts toward your graduation, and then this student will definitely visit. Okay, I'm sorry to say that, but that's the only way. And until then, it's very hard to motivate our students to the ASEAN region. Just like it is very difficult to motivate American students to come to Taiwan. I think the mentality is the same, because the American student, if they want to come to Asia, I think the most favorite destination would be Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore, so and so. But virtually nobody, very few were willing to come to Taiwan. So I think the mentality is the same. So anyway, it takes time to convince the student to change, to make different decisions. Yeah.
I like the ideas of let the student change their mentalities about it, because I believe all the regions have their own strength and their uniqueness. And then seeing that differently and highlight it within your institutions are very important, because as for Malaysian, and personally, Malaysian have similarity in Singapore, but then how do we highlight ourselves? So that's very interesting, because it's been shared by our friends and panelists here. But I would like to bring, this is, sorry, slightly gloomy kind of idea, but despite all that you shared, you said that there's a lot of program with it, and then lots of activities that there's a lot of several students being part of it. Yeah, because a recent 2020 QS survey titled "How COVID-19 Impact Prospective International Students at Different Study Level" reported that only 43% of them saying that they are not interested in online learning. So we are asking that how our program that we are created balance? Is there existing a balance between online and virtual mobilities? Is it possible to balance it throughout our programs? Yeah. So I would like to hear a take from Dr. Latiff on this. Yeah. Is it possible? We create a lot. Do we have a good feedback out of it? Yeah.
It's definitely challenging. It's definitely, but if you ask us last year or last 2 years, do we like online meetings? We're like, no one jumped into the Zoom bandwagon. No one discovered Webex when they already existed previously. It didn't exist because of the pandemic, but so we understood that this is the new way to go. But I do agree, there are some challenges, especially with regards to the cultural aspect of things. Now, of course, it's very difficult. How do we incorporate the cultural elements when everything's online? There are certain initiatives that UKM has done. I'm not saying it's of a high success rate, but it is like I said, this year is still experimenting on what we can do. So for example, we had a program for our inbound exchange program. A lot of them are from Indonesia. So what we did is our students here in Malaysia would actually go to the night market and capture the visuals of the night market and share to the students again on what their experiences are. So they are showing some traditional dances through recording some of the traditional dances here as well on what happens. Though this is in the pipeline, but it has not been implemented, we are in negotiations, especially for our new Colombo Plan programs, for the students to be able to take courses virtually online, but we are trying to work, and negotiations have taken place with Malaysian families in Brisbane, in Melbourne, to assist with certain things, especially right now. We are all envious of Australia and New Zealand, for example. Everyone's having a great time, you know, and they've been maintaining zero numbers or very, very minimal numbers. So what we're doing is we're in touch with some families there to support us, though this is still in negotiations. We're at a stage where it's all trial and error, and we are all trying to find a balance, a formula that works for us. I'm not saying that it's going to work for everyone. We're going to ask, so some of our representatives, I know if it involves the embassies, if embassies members reach out to us and say, how can we help you out on certain things? Let's do it like that. Let's maybe have someone there. You know, we're talking about internationalization and we're not using the old formula anymore. The pandemic has changed the way we are required to think. And although at the moment we might think, well, it's not practical to be bothering families there, we're talking about finding your initiating contacts or whoever who's also out there, who's interested to teach about our culture and all that. So, you know, those are things that we can look into. I'm not saying that you have to, but we are thinking about all these other options as well in terms of what opportunities that offers. It is challenging, but there's certain things that we can highlight. For example, programs like business courses, management courses could actually work quite well on the virtual platform. If you've noticed all the masterclass classes, those MOOCs and online content from Harvard or Yale, for example, I think there's a lot of dynamics and in those masterclass classes, for example. Language courses, for example, learning Mandarin could be taught online. But there are some courses, for example, like we offer a thing like sustainable tropical heritage and indigenous communities of Malaysia. That is something that we still need to sit down and develop and think about what would be the best thing to offer for them. Yeah.
So instead of speaking of balance between online learning, we find an alternative. So that is a create new experience. There's one thing that questions here. I think the first question by Ampon Songkarasi relate to this balance online virtual mobility, saying that do you believe or think that virtual exchange program would develop or raise those skills comparing to normal one? What do you think of this? Yeah, it's also, does it provide the same, or is it raise the skill, or how? What do you take on this, Mr. Darren? Yeah.
Well, not being or not having been in the classroom in a teaching role for quite some time, I would defer to the expertise of my colleagues on the call. But what I would say is that there's no blanket approach, and I think it's all about the context. It's the context of the subject, it's the context of where you're studying the subject, and maybe what you're seeking to achieve. So the outcomes should really inform, or the desired outcomes should really inform the pedagogy and the approach. There's no doubt that some approaches and some methodologies lend themselves well to a digital approach, but not all, just as well pointed out by Dr. Latiff. So I would say that there has to be pragmatism in the approach or the application of digital modalities to higher education, or any form of education for that matter. And if it seems that we're shoehorning something in, or we're trying to do something just because that's where we're at, then it probably should be reconsidered. I think mapping a physical education experience, or trying to map a physical education experience onto a digital education experience, just doesn't work. And maybe that is the reason there's been a reaction in that QS study to digital modalities, because in the early days of the pandemic, many institutions found themselves trying to do that for, really just in the best effort to provide something for the students. But we've had more time, and I think we can be a lot more thoughtful and considerate of the context of the programs and the students and what we would like to achieve.
Oh, that's so true, Darren, because the foremost is well-informed outcome of the program. And then I think all the lecturers come across that problem that they try to translate it or have the same outcome as physical. I think we have to be innovative on it. Speaking of innovative or having a different idea, we have to realize, as Darren said, that it's not all can be translated or in the platform of virtual. So this has come to the key question that we have. What is a strategic innovative approach to this mobility structure, design and planned for your organizations? I would like to start with Prof. Ricky, would you like to share with us your strategic innovative approach to this mobility design? Or you could add to the idea.
Do you mean virtual or physical?
Yes, virtual, please.
Well, again,
physical is well known. We need one on strategic innovative on your.
Yeah. Well, I just want to echo some of the comment mentioned by Professor Latiff. I believe come up with several interesting courses that might better attract the student. Probably is the one good option to pursue. And he mentioned the management related course. Yes, I do agree. For example, the NCKU has a pretty good management program, and we have quite a few incoming students participated in the mobility program. I mean, hosted by our College of Management. So having interesting courses probably the best way to entice the student to participate this virtual program. I think that's the best way to go. And I just want to mention the difficulty we have right now is to come up with the courses that are taught in English. That's probably the obstacle we are currently facing, because all the lecture material given by Professor Wu are in English. That's not an issue. The problem is deliver the lecture. And so, the English is not our primary language. And a lot of professors, even though they received a PhD long time ago from Western country, but it's been quite a long time, and they never had a chance to speak English. So when you make the demand of these professors to deliver lecture in English, seriously, not many professors could comply to this kind of request. So the only remedy that we have
Is it just me or
young that can be molded so that we can do? Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Prof. Ricky, for that interesting several courses that all of us can think of and look toward our programs and see how it can work, or just like you said, the management program, which is already there. Yeah, I believe it's a challenge to the lecturers as well, because it is not their first language, or even, the language is a barrier, as well as the technology itself. Make things interesting online is a barrier as well. Yeah, as you mentioned, because it's not just for, probably it's for the digital native, it's much easier, but to the old professor that maybe they take some time to do so. And then I hope they not give up on that. Yeah, because I believe all of us here work on that as well. Yeah, we're not digital native, and then we work on that. Speaking of that, and speaking of these challenges, as well as finding innovations, Mr. David, do you have any things you want to add to that? or any innovations that come out or your strategic innovative approach in mobility or designs in the Tecnológico de Monterrey?
Yes, well, just to add, and I definitely agree that it required a paradigm shift, not just from the students who had an idea of what virtual or online education was, from the institution, as well as how useful it could be to train students, but from the faculty, as has already been mentioned. Can I do it? Do I have the tools? Do I have the knowledge to deliver part of my course online? And I think those were three aspects that we considered and that we think they're very important. And also, as already we have mentioned, it's trying to rely on what has been happening in our institutions. I can testify that most of our institutions are very innovative. There's a lot of ideas moving throughout all the faculty, all the schools. And in our particular case, we had been already starting, let's say, a paradigm shift in how we were educating our students by having a new educational model that had 4 pillars. I will not elaborate too much on that, but one of them was flexibility. This idea of changing where, how, when you learned. So that had been in our background before the pandemic, and it was definitely helpful, or made it easier for our faculty to be open to try new approaches. And one thing that I would like to finally mention is that we also had to fight this idea of that the forms of mobility, of virtual mobility, were replacing other forms of mobility. Yes, that was the case under the current scenario of the pandemic, because our students could not go abroad and come to Mexico. But we had to take a different approach of a more complementing way of how we can find ways in which both, let's say, forms of mobility can coexist. And it has been already mentioned, they provide different benefits. We cannot think of immersion, of being adapted to new physical environments with virtual mobilities, but we can maybe take advantage of that possibility of students might be more open to share, to interact with others because they have technology in between. So that can also open new possibilities for cultural awareness, for intercultural collaboration. And as had to be mentioned by Dr. Latiff, you can also develop other forms of skills parallel to the international or global vision ones, the ones that had to do with being technologically savvy, having some sort of other soft skills embedded in the design. So I think I would just point out those big things. One, to be prepared, flexible, and then to be willing to think differently in terms of virtual mobility.
Yep, thank you, David. I like the word that you keep on emphasis, that flexibility, because when we build a new program, so we look into flexibility. It's not really totally translating it, but there's innovative ideas of a complementing way of the existing one, and in the form of mobility that already exists, or how we translate it and provide different advantages. We hope that our students will see that as well as the researcher, that these new virtual will provide different advantage, and also a culture awareness. I do agree, as mentioned by various Dr. Latiff previously, and the technologies and a new skill in technologies and soft skill. So there's a lot of questions here, but let's go to the last question before we come into this question. It's probably linked, but I think there's quite on the research mobility sector. So I would like to come into the last question, because we have another less than 10, 20, 12 minutes to go. So as we look in the future, so what is the future of virtual student mobility once the travel and health restrictions are lifted? Dr. Latiff, would you like to share with us your take on this? Yeah.
Can you repeat again the question?
As we look in the future, what is the future of this virtual student mobility? Once the travel and health restrictions are lifted, we already build a lot of content online. We create different platform, and then and then we have this post vaccines, and then people can travel. How do you see it? Can we maintain it, or is it become another things in the future, or how?
Well, I'm excited for a post-pandemic period. I'm excited for a post-vaccinated where we've reached good herd immunity. I'm looking forward to that. I'm also realistic that the progress will be different for different countries. And some countries are affected differently from ours. But it is for us, with regards to the future of virtual mobility, I think the pandemic, in a form of a blessing in disguise, it has put us to explore the virtual mobility platform. It has put us in a position where we had no other options but to explore it further. I think that was a plus point where people now know of this. I would say if the world becomes just back as to how it's been before the pandemic, then I'm sure traveling would take place. Physical mobility would still be exciting.
Yeah.
But I do believe that there could be some more cost-cutting measures where instead of a fully physical program, it could be a hybrid mobility program where some students can actually do the lectures online, but can go for a week instead of 3 weeks for experiential learning. Or maybe some courses where they do not need to go for a whole semester, but just participate in maybe the last level of production or studio work instead of being there for 14 weeks. And we look into that, there's a possibility of having more students going abroad. We're having more students getting the internationalization experience. There was a saying before that internationalization could be seen as something very elitist, where if you can afford to go abroad, you'll go abroad. So that's why for me, organizations like SHARE coming in, offering those opportunities, we welcome that as well, because it gives a range of our students that has not been able to go to get that opportunity. For us in University Kebangsaan Malaysia, I think there was also a question on this in the chat room. We do have some funding as well, and we do encourage groups within the B40. The B40 is in the lower socioeconomic status of students to also apply for these funds to go. And it also, household incomes of families also is a contributing factor in terms of how much allocation is provided to the students. What is the future of mobility? I think now we are opening up to more options. So we have to move from just a physical mobility, there's a hybrid mobility, and who knows, there might be a lot of students out there who would love to get the international experience but could not afford to go out. At least they'll be making friends online, they'll be learning from lectures from scholars online, and I think that should be maintained to a certain level. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Latiff. There's a lot on explore the virtual mobilities and the cost cutting particularly, and new opportunity for those underprivileged of learning or financials, they need financial support or the lack of financial support. So back to the same questions, what do you think about the future, Prof. Ricky? Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think that after the pandemic, this virtual exchange is going to stay because this really changed our perspective toward how the education should be delivered in the future. As Professor Latiff had mentioned, that all these economically deprived individuals should not be left out from the process. And the question is, how can we involve this student in the mobility program? That is a bit tricky. Before the pandemic, usually that when students participate in a physical program, the student must have a certain financial means to travel.
Indeed.
If they did not receive any scholarship from their university. So a lot of our students, okay, they come from a well-to-do family, so traveling is not an issue. But few students do have this financial disadvantages. So they would not be able to participate in the physical mobility program. So if we have if we can give them another option, a virtual exchange experience, then that probably will, fulfill their dream, studying abroad virtually. Probably, so that's why I'm saying that this virtual exchange is going to stay after the pandemic. And so I would recommend that if we do have a funding, actually the money should go into people who design courses for this online platform. And how can these courses be made interesting? Money should go there. And also that for those people that I mentioned in the very beginning, that if they don't want to visit certain country, at least you can join their online program. Maybe that's the first way to go. So until then perhaps once they join the online program, maybe their mentality, their mindset will start to change.
Indeed.
So maybe one day they will decide to visit the country physically.
Or even after find a friends through the virtual.
Yes. So I think all the students, especially the academically disadvantaged student.
Thank you. You really imprint that this is it's a new education that will stay, and then definitely it is an opportunity to the disadvantaged student in terms of financial. And then I do agree in the ideas of funding for developments of platform for these online. Because I'm going to ask the same thing to Mr. Darren, but Darren, you'll be later. But what about you, David? What do you see in the future about these online mobility?
Yeah, well, I agree, and I would just underline this importance of considering virtual mobility as a strategy for internationalization at home. And right now it's at home literally, but later on when borders open, it might be just at home at the university or at the local country. And as has been mentioned, the barriers, we have explored a lot this issue with our students, are initially economical barriers to go abroad. But there are others. There are some language barriers. Sometimes students are not willing to go abroad because of other reasons. And I think that virtual mobility could be a first good step to try to increase, let's say, internationalization intention. We have found that we have done a few surveys, and we have done some interviews in students who have not gone abroad and had the chance to participate either in the collaboration with UKM and other partners, are more and are willing, and they're eager to go abroad. They want to experience now the experience probably that was not in their plan when they joined the university. And so this is opening, as has been mentioned, new opportunities. And I think that as institutions, as it has been mentioned, we have to be ready to what's next. And in some cases would be, again, facilitating, providing those resources, those training programs, and those opportunities for students as well. So I think that in that direction would be some of the future avenues, or what we should consider and learn more about, because it has been a great opportunity to experience, to prototype, as it has been mentioned, activities or collaborations that are hopefully of good quality and that have created this interest, this motivation in our students. So we need to think of what's next.
Thank you, David. Yeah. And Darren, what do you take on this? And what is the future, particularly for your organization, so, as a share?
Well, SHARE is a finite program, so our program will come to an end at the end of 2022. But what we hope is that our work and our work in conjunction with the ASEAN Secretariat, the Education, Youth and Sports Division, the various regional stakeholders, institutions and practitioners, we hope that will continue. And it's really written into the approach to the SHARE program that access or equity, diversity and inclusion are really important aspects. So yes, we are largely focused on internationalization and student mobility, but we cannot have student mobility or good student mobility without quality assurance and access. And, this is very much a direction that the European Union is taking alongside its partners in the ASEAN Secretariat. Inequality and issues of access have been around for a very long time. I mean, it almost goes hand in hand with society. And they have been exacerbated by the pandemic. But just to go back to the excellent points made by the other panelists, we have seen the value of digital modalities in increasing access as well. And yes, there are questions over people's access to technology, and that's something that needs to be addressed as well. Pre-pandemic, we had roughly 5 million internationally mobile students. That only represented about 2.5% of the total 200 million students worldwide. So there's clearly an issue in the internationalization of education or the people's access to physical mobility opportunities. If we can augment people's opportunity to develop an international mindset or a global mindset through digital modalities, that's a very good thing. I suppose I would guard against having physical mobility for those who can afford it and for those who can't. I mean, I think we'd like to avoid that kind of situation. And I suppose that's where funding comes into the question. So SHARE has provided funding for short-term mobility scholarships. That's, of course, a finite thing, but we're working with the ASEAN Secretariat and other regional stakeholders to establish an ASEAN branded scholarship that will be ASEAN managed, operationalized, and owned, and also be financially sustainable. Now, the source of funding, of course, that's always a big discussion and a big investigation. But I think it's something that even the private sector needs to be involved in, given that they are beneficiaries of graduates with international mindsets. And there's a lot of good research to demonstrate the impact that students who've had an international experience, the impact they can have in the workplace. So let's see the private sector come forward and work with organizations like the ASEAN Secretariat and the wider higher education community. Let's have governments look at the value of that for their societies. There are philanthropic organizations that see this as a public good as well. So there are any number of ways to find solutions to funding and inequality and issues of access to education. But much like today, it really just takes people gathering together to find solutions and being willing to consider new ways of doing things.
Thank you very much, Darren. You highlights a lot there, but we definitely know there's a funding available for this. If it's pandemic's over and post-pandemic's over, and we still have that funding for short-term mobility. And we know that we need to bring more private sector because the benefit of it, the government is philanthropic to be part of those people who benefited from these internalizations, or students or graduates that goes into internalizations, which is given some extra benefit to them as well. So I think that's concluded it all, because we learned about the trend of student mobility throughout the region, which is declines, and a lot of programs have been put on hold. But then we see there's a lot of program created to accommodate, but not kind of like totally replace it, because it's totally different, but it kind of like new innovations or new experience. I love that idea, new experience of mobilities. And we see that, and in the future, we see that these will stay. And then because it is give a lot of opportunity in terms of either it's, we already explore virtual mobilities or online programs. And then we know it's cost cutting because we give opportunity for those who doesn't have financial advantage, or those who have other barriers of not being able to come to the country, or health or others. Or it's also give a new opportunity to develop projects for those who develop content or lectures, as well as financials from various other institutions. Yep, thank you so much. It's very much that we have accumulated today, and we learn a lot from it. I know there's a lot of questions, but I'm not be able to post it because we are already 11:34, and then the other questions are more like, I'm so sorry that we don't have enough time to discuss about the other question, but we hope we can bring it to another seminar, because they asked about quality assurance, which is have been mentioned by Darren as well. And then there's also about research mobility, which is, I think, another picture to look at. And then we will discuss is another platform. With that, I say thank you so much, all the panelists, for your support and your insights. And you have given us a lot of strategies in this pandemic. And then now we definitely see there's a light at the end of the tunnel. So there's a silver lining in everything. Yeah, we believe that. So thank you so much to all the panelists. Let us all give them a virtual round of applause to all the panelists for their participations and wonderful contributions to this webinar today. So to all who have been staying with us, thanks as well to all participants who have been loyal to us throughout this webinar. I return the screen to you, Mr. Hafiz. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Tanot. That was amazing. That was amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for that very insightful, very inspirational, very motivational, educational enough for everyone here. Yes, to all the panelists and the moderator, National Cheng Kung University Overseas Hub in Malaysia and International Relations Center UKM Global, thank you all for making the session today a success. I believe there was some aha moments. Yeah, suddenly there's a provocating kind of experience here. The thoughts about how to better handle and position ourselves during these trying times. Yes, you know, even from my personal experience, not only the educators, administrators has been, you know, like helping the students to meet people abroad or their friends abroad, but also they are also between students association and student associations. They're having all these virtual programs together, and this is very, very, what you call that, very helpful for our students to get motivated and getting engaged with the world around them. So I hope the sharing gave us some ideas that we all could adopt and adapt in our institutions. I'm sure that everyone here has benefited from all the success stories and experiences shared by our panelists. Yes, thank you again, everyone. Yeah, before I end this webinar, on behalf of the organizing committee, I would like to apologize if there's any shortcomings from our side. Thank you and good luck, everyone, and have a great day and a very good afternoon and evening on your side in Mexico. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining and have a good day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
David and also Darren, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It was very enjoyable.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you and take
Bye.
care, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.